Hi, I'm Mariam Ahmed and you're watching Uni TV. Imagine being a scientist of the surf. Now that's a pretty awesome job on a beautiful summer's day. In this science special, we explore the impacts of science on the world. We've got surgical patches made from crab shells that replace the need for stitches, a process to turn shopping bags into environmentally friendly steel. And we learn how technology like this can put Australia onto a carbon diet. Let's hear from Dr. Ben McNeil, a climate scientist, on this topic.
The scientific debate about whether we are experiencing climate change is pretty much over. The rising level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is warming the planet, that's clear. Climate scientists are now concentrating on the numbers. Just how warm will it get over the next century? The rest of us wonder how life will change. Is it the end of prosperity? Will climate change wreck the economy? No, in fact, changing the way we generate and use energy gives us enormous opportunity. Nations that adopt new strategies are the ones that are going to prosper this century. We know we can limit the damage caused by CO2 by reducing the amount we pump into the atmosphere. But this is no longer just a matter of social conscience or personal choice. Any moment, governments are going to legislate to penalise heavy carbon producers. Pretty soon, everything you buy will have a carbon audit somewhere in the label. Manufacturers who have a high carbon footprint will have to buy carbon credits. Profits will go down, costs will go up, and consumers won't buy it. Many European countries are already planning for a carbon-driven market. In Germany, for example, are investing heavily in renewable energy sources. By 2020, a quarter of the electricity used will be from renewable energy, wind or solar generation. The rest will come from natural gas-fired power stations and some hydro, all low carbon cost. Even if a carbon credit scheme was introduced today, this German car wouldn't attract a heavy loading. The electricity that's used to produce the car comes from relatively clean, low-carbon sources, and therefore it means low cost. Especially compared to this. Australia's homegrown Ford has a huge carbon cost involved in its production, and that's because electricity in Australia depends on coal. Australia has 30 coal-fired power stations like this one. They produce nearly 80% of Australia's power. Coal is the staple food of our energy diet and has made us carbon obese. Coal power is cheap at the moment, but it produces millions of tonnes of CO2 every year. While the rest of the world is going on a carbon diet, Australia is the fat man in the corner. At home, we can turn off all the lights we want. We can live in total darkness, not use any electricity at all, and it still wouldn't do anything to reduce the carbon cost of our manufacturing. The irony is that we have, potentially, a much bigger resource opportunity than coal: solar power. The Australian deserts are potential solar powerhouses that could export clean electricity across Asia. At the moment, solar power is more expensive than coal, but pricing carbon will quickly reverse that. We have plenty of land available for wind farms too, and it's these industries that have much better long-term employment opportunities than coal. We've become economically dependent on coal to the extent that there are currently millions of dollars being spent to find ways of turning coal into a clean fuel. And here we bump into the politics of climate change. The firmly entrenched mantra that what's good for the environment is bad for the economy. Combating global warming, or at least reducing the temperature rise, is now on the international agenda. The politics are complex, but the good news is that the current clean industrial revolution is being driven by something more powerful than politics, and that's money. Globally, industry has seen a massive opportunity, and companies are adopting clean technology because it'll make them money. And in part two, we'll see how.
I'm Dr. Rob Brander, and I'm a surf scientist from the University of New South Wales. And in this episode, we're going to focus on breaking waves. What happens to waves when they come into shallow water? How do they slow down? How do they change their shape? How do they start to bend? And when they break, how do they break? Do they curl over and crash? Do they roll in gently? These are some of the answers that we're going to explain today. The way that waves finally break really depends on what's underneath. What's the shape of the bottom? There's three basic types. There's plunging waves, spilling waves, and surging waves. Now today behind me we've got some classic spilling waves. The bottom of the beach or the ocean is fairly flat. So the waves come in, they slow down gently, they steepen gently, and when they break gently. And the top of the waves just spill down the front of the wave. That's why we call it a spilling wave. Now, another common type is called the plunging wave, and these are called dumpers or barrels or tubes. And these happen when the waves go from deep water to shallow water really quickly. And they slow down so fast that you start to get this curl or motion of water curling over and crashing down. Now that's not happening today. The water's not deep enough. When it gets deep, the waves will start to do that. The third type is called the surging wave, and these ones are also very common, but they're totally different. They don't curl over and plunge, they don't spill, they just sort of form this bulge near the shoreline, and when they break, they just rush up really fast, or they surge up really fast, and then they rush back. And they tend to happen when beaches are fairly steep. Well, the whole reason we get surfing waves is because when the waves come in from deep to shallow water, they slow down, and they interact with the shape of the bottom, and sometimes they can bend, and that's called wave refraction. So let's say you've got a rock headland, and out here the waves are coming in nice and straight, the crests are parallel and straight, and then the wave starts to get into shallower water at the headland. Well, this part of the wave slows down, this part of the wave is still going fast. So you start to get this bending of the wave, and that bending is called wave refraction. And that's why you can jump on a wave here and surf all the way around. Well, we've just talked about why waves break in the ocean and the different types of breaking waves. In the next episode, we'll focus on the tide. Believe it or not, the tide is a wave, and it's a lot more complex than you might think.
The humble crab. Who would have imagined it carries life-saving qualities? But this suit of armour is proving to have protective abilities reaching far beyond the world of crustaceans. UNSW researchers are using the unique properties of crab shell to create a novel seal that will allow surgery without stitches. Known as Surgilux, the device is a thin polymer film based on chitin, the element that allows a crab shell to stick to the membrane underneath. The film is placed on a surgical wound and exposed to an infrared laser. This heats the film just enough to meld it with the flesh.
It's almost like welding the chitosan bond to the tissue of the wound site. So the operation is simple, it's quick, it's cost effective. You get around variations in technical ability of surgeons with their kind of stitching. There is effectively no scar tissue formation, and the great thing about the chitosan film is also antimicrobial. You know, so you're also helping to prevent infection. Sutures are a 5,000-year-old technology. They've changed very little in that period. In themselves, they act as a source of infection. They're gold standard purely because of their bonding strength. They will pull two pieces of tissue together. And it would take a significant amount of strength, 100 kilopascals in fact, to pull them apart. So if you have conditions where there is fluid leakage, for example blood, spinal fluid, or even gases, air from the lungs, these are things that you don't want happening internally.
It's the ability of the material to actually adhere, so really stick to the biological material that makes it stand apart, without the need to do suturing.
Surgilux has Food and Drug Administration approval in the United States and is expected to be commercially available within 5 years.
The creative spark of an Australian researcher is about to transform steel making. New green technology that turns waste plastic and rubber into steel will soon appear on the world market. One Steel has signed a global deal with Sydney's University of New South Wales to sub-license the technology. The process is the brainchild of Professor Veena Sahajwalla.
Well, what we have done is we've actually created the ability to recycle waste plastics and waste rubber for making steel. In the process itself, we've actually shown that the steel-making process can in fact become more energy efficient. So we've lowered our electricity consumption. So it's win-win from both recycling waste materials as well as from energy consumption that's used in the steel-making process.
It was just such an exciting opportunity with the environmental issues that were there. Originally this project was all about environment. What can we do to get rid of landfill? Then once we started doing the trials, we saw that it was a major improvement to our productivity and led to a reduction in our electrical energy and our cost.
Items such as shopping bags, takeaway containers and plastic drink bottles are reduced to granulated plastic. These granules are then injected into the furnace. This process accesses carbon, an essential element in electric arc furnace steelmaking. The process has the added benefit of holding in heat, which ultimately lowers the cost of steelmaking.
What a researcher feels when you've actually gone off and, come up with an idea, trialed it, tested it, proven all the theories, and everything works beautifully in the lab. And that's a big, amazing achievement, But then the ultimate icing on the cake is when you've got, an industry that is so keen to take it on board and is as excited as you are to, in fact, implement it and to make it happen. That's been amazing.
Steelmakers are looking to reduce their cost and improve their productivity. And this is one way they can do it, which is environmentally friendly. It is a no-brainer.
Hi, I'm Dan Gaffney and I'm joined today by Dr. Mark Diesendorf. He's from the Institute of Environmental Studies here at the University of New South Wales, and he is the author, most recently, of a book titled Climate Action, a Campaign Manual for Greenhouse Solutions. Mark, welcome to On the Couch.
Pleasure to be here, Dan.
What's the purpose of your book, Mark?
Well, Climate Action is actually the sequel to an earlier book called Greenhouse Solutions with Sustainable Energy, and the earlier book looked at the science and technology behind the response strategies for greenhouse solutions in the energy sector, and then addressed some of the policies that are needed to get the appropriate technologies up and running. It ended by finding that really there was no action taking place. We've got most of the technologies, they're not going to be that expensive, but we're not getting action from government. So the new book is a real transformation for me. It's focusing on the community, on society, and trying to provide resources for citizen action to get government action on climate change.
I'm sure your publisher asked you this, but why is this a book of the times? Why is it timely now?
Well, it's very timely now because in Australia and most other countries outside of Europe, governments are not actually taking substantial action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In some cases they are implementing small token policies, but there's nothing of substance happening which is an adequate response to the situation that science exposes right now.
Now, you say in your book, you refer to a group called the Greenhouse Mafia, and you say that the Greenhouse Mafia are essentially opposed to meaningful action in this country and even globally to real purposeful action on climate change. Who are they and why are they opposed to meaningful action on climate?
Well, the greenhouse mafia are the vested interests in the old technologies of the 19th and 20th centuries. So we're talking about coal, aluminium, iron and steel, cement, motor vehicles based on petrol and diesel, and the forestry industry. And these industries have been very active internationally through the Global Climate Coalition and here in Australia through various coalitions to basically to undermine any genuine action on climate change. And this was well documented under the previous federal government. A whistleblower called Guy Pearce actually wrote a book about his experiences exposing that. And unfortunately, with the change of government, nothing really has changed. They're the same public servants who have very close links with the greenhouse mafia industries, and as a result we're getting policies from governments which are not really effective in doing anything about greenhouse response.
Now, there would be tens of thousands of Australians and millions of people around the world who are indeed gainfully employed in those so-called dirty industries, carbon-intensive industries like oil and coal. How would you expect those people to want to participate in a grassroots campaign, as you've outlined in your book, when it would probably be putting them out of a job?
Well, already there are a number of coal miners who are strongly supporting renewable energy, and even the CFMEU, which is the main mining union, has a strong pro-renewable energy policy. I think a lot of the workers in these fields already understand that many new jobs can be created in the new technologies of energy efficiency and renewable energy. And in fact, in many cases they won't be thrown out of work anyway. In many cases the transition will occur so that it's really the children of coal miners who will no longer be coal miners.
On the back of your book, there's an interesting statement. I wanted to read it to you to make sure I get it correct. It says that social movements have non-violently overthrown dictatorships, achieved votes for women, and abolished slavery. And this book, you say, will empower citizens to build the climate action movement into an irresistible global force that might just save our planet. Sounds like a manifesto for global revolution, Mark, is it?
Non-violent revolution, definitely. And I think, yes, we're at a stage where the science is saying that unless we turn around our whole practices in terms of increasing greenhouse gas emissions within the next 5 years or so globally, we're going to have very serious impacts. So we do need a global movement, and I believe really at this stage the only hope is a movement of citizens, and citizens include professionals, they include business people, trade unionists, faith groups, and of course environmental and social justice groups.
Sounds like you don't really trust the democratic process, Mark. We've got a government elected in Canberra only 2 years ago by an overwhelming number of Australians. There's a CPRS bill coming before the House again. Why not trust the process?
Well, as a scientist, I've analysed the bill, and in my view, the CPRS, the so-called Carbon Pollution Reduction Scheme, isn't going to be effective. I would call it the Carbon Pollution Reinforcement Scheme. It's actually going to encourage an increase in Australia's greenhouse gas emissions. It's set up in that way. I do trust the democratic process, but I think the democratic process goes beyond voting once every 3 years or so. It requires strong, continuous participation by concerned citizens. Otherwise, democracy will not live up to the ideals that are set for it.
Mark, it was a pleasure to talk to you on The Couch. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
It's not every day that scientists discover new animal species in the middle of the country's largest city. But that's what happened when a group from the University of New South Wales and the Australian Museum set out to survey a tiny island in the heart of Sydney's congested harbour. Clark Island, which lies off densely populated Darling Point, was the subject of an original survey in the 1870s and 1880s by renowned marine biologist William Haswell. Haswell identified more than 100 species of marine crustaceans and other invertebrates. 130 years later, UNSW students, academics and Australian museum experts set about discovering just how many of those creatures remain and what else may lie undiscovered in the island's varied habitats.
William Haswell was originally a Scotsman, and he moved to Australia for health reasons. When he came here, he did extensive collections of the marine invertebrates. One of the nice things that we could do today, obviously, would be to rediscover some of these missing species. They're all small crustaceans, little shrimp-like animals that live in amongst kelp forests and shallow subtidal regions.
High on the most wanted list are 2 species of isopods, small shrimp-like creatures that were discovered by Haswell but haven't been seen since.
So they've gone missing from these locations. It might be that they've become locally extinct, or it may be that we simply haven't found them yet.
Having collected hundreds of specimens in just a day's work, it was back to the Sydney Marine Institute of Science for the process of identification. It's an onerous task.
If you were to sample all of the invertebrates in about a metre squared of kelp forest, you're likely to get in excess of 10,000 individuals.
Identification of the haul may take some weeks, but already the team knows it has discovered several unnamed species. They also found a shrimp-like crustacean called an amphipod, previously only found in Hong Kong.
Now that's what I call a great science excursion. I hope you enjoyed our science special. You can catch more of us on our Uni Live section of tv.unsw.edu.au. I'm Marianne, and you're watching Uni TV.